Welcome to M4G Advocacy Media, the Journey Series podcast. I'm Crystal. I'm a co-host, and I have red glasses, brown eyes, brown hair, black and white shirt. And I have a white wall behind me with a white curtain and a cross and plants.
And hi, I'm Mark. I'm co-host of the Journey Series podcast. I'm a brown man with glasses, black and white beard, brown eyes. I'm bald, and today I'm wearing a blue shirt.
Last week we had John Mars for part 1, and this week we're going to do part 2. So enjoy.
Well, hello everyone. I'm John Morris. I'm a white man with dark blonde hair. I wear eyeglasses, and today I'm wearing a blue and pink striped polo shirt. And so I really try to be mindful about the conversations that I'm having, either as sort of the person on the receiving end, or as the person who is sort of leading that conversation. You know, my thought is, how can I maintain this person's attention and drive them to take something, from what I'm sharing?
Yeah.
That sort of leads us, or reminds me rather of what you talked about in our pre-interview there, and I guess during earlier today, about having that early experience of developing an integrated classroom and incorporating everyone's different learning style and abilities into the curriculum. And I'm wondering, how do we take a diversified approach or integrated approach to develop the systems that are in place now, or further develop what we've got?
Well, I think that one of the keys that is often overlooked is feedback. Not only the feedback that we receive from others, sort of that they've willingly and freely provided us, but also when we're sourcing feedback, where we're getting it from, who we're getting it from, and whether the people that, sort of are giving us the check mark, all right, you've done this well, are the people that we really need to hear that from. I think pretty often I've become pretty focused, even within the travel industry, on the hotel space, because I think that there are easy victories that can be achieved there for improving physical accessibility. There's a standard. Most hotels don't presently comply with that. And I think in, a future remodel or a new construction project, it's easy to get those things right. But I've realized that there aren't very many people within the industry that understand the standards which they're supposed to be building to. I've had a number of architects and designers reach out to me, and they've said, hey, you say this on your website about what's required in an accessible bathroom, but we think that this is right. And I'm like, no, it's not. What I've written is truthful. Here's how you can find it in the regulation, and you'll understand that the design that you've shared is not compliant because of this. And so, I think in that circumstance with, just physical accessibility, we've got a lot of people coming out who are experts in name only. They've attained their expert status because they've, had so many years of service doing things the wrong way. And so that is, I think, sort of a lesson that we can apply to every aspect of our advocacy work and projects and programs that interface with people with disabilities. Is our feedback coming from the people that we're serving?
Right.
Are they the ones informing the work that we are doing? Or am I using my own perspective to force something across that doesn't actually meet the needs of the people that this project is supposed to serve?
Right. That is incredibly important when a company or a business recognizes that they don't just want to check a box. They want actual experience. So they reach out to somebody else disabled that can properly teach them the procedures, and they're adamant about actually getting it right and making it actually accessible. And that is economically makes so much sense, because that's going to bring more customers, more money, more profit, the whole thing. But I don't understand why that's not already a thing, some it is, some it is, but for the most part, no.
I think maybe one example, and I know there's not total agreement on this within the disability community, and it's a debate that likely will continue for some time, but there's a corporate America has sort of force-fed this perspective of people first language in the way that we refer to others, and in particular the disability community. My perspective has always been that identity first is the way to go. I know a lot of my friends within the community agree with me. I've had conversations and debates with others who disagree, but I think that something that is happening in pretty much every corporation around the country is that people are being taught to refer to me as a person with a disability rather than as a disabled person. And I think that sort of at the core for me, it's not so much the language itself that is material. What I care about is sort of the underlying idea of, where does my inability to do something come from?
Right.
And if I'm a person with a disability, that suggests that it's my disability that's holding me back. Whereas if I'm a disabled person, it suggests, and this sort of goes to the social model of disability. If I'm a disabled person, it means that I'm a person who is disabled by the environment in which I exist. Right. And so prior to moving to a big city, when I was stuck at home with my family, I was stuck there not because I have a disability. I could go out, It was just a matter of I didn't have the tools to go out. The environment that I lived in was not accessible to me. There was no way for me to get from, my parents' home to town or to the hospital without some, grand service and very expensive, grand accessible vehicle to come out. Whereas, in Boston, I can go out to many restaurants down the street. I can, go to the train station. I can hop on the city bus. And I'm much less disabled here than I am in many other cities around the country. And that's because the infrastructure here is accessible. There are services that allow me to gain the access that I need. and so I become much less disabled, and I think that really is frustrating to me when I see companies say, well, you are a person with a disability, and that's how we're going to refer to you. And I think that obviously everyone's personal preference with their own identity and the way that they're referred to should be honored. But I think that the reason that, industry, has pushed this, person first sort of ideology, has nothing to do with the person. They don't care anymore about you or me or our needs. And they certainly are putting the focus and training people to recognize, well, no, he can't go into the swimming pool because we don't have a swimming pool lift. No, they're saying he can't go into the swimming pool because he has a disability, not because we haven't made the accommodations that would easily allow him to take advantage of this amenity.
Again, that's toxic.
Exactly. And I think that is sort of, no matter what I talk about, I speak at conferences on a lot of different topics in the travel industry, but now no matter what you have brought me to talk about, I'm going to talk about the social model of disability and compare that to the medical model, and try to encourage people, even if they don't adopt, the particular methodology that I prefer. I hope that they then recognize, well, yeah, if we make the accommodations, if we create a universally accessible environment, then no one will be disabled. No one will be denied the opportunity to engage with us in our business. No one will be unable to be a customer. And I think that really, if we're shifting this from, sort of the right thing or the thing that you must do to the thing that returns your investment and creates opportunity for your business, the social model is where we need to live.
Right. You had said that the main government model has been, human or person first. Okay, so disabled people are not human, because they have totally twisted everything, and the purpose of a government, I would know. I have been lost on, okay, I know what I was taught government it was supposed to be, but I can now obviously see differently, what it actually is. And it's about a hierarchy. And the main purpose of the government is supposed to be to give people what they need to be just to survive, to keep them alive to work, well, if you don't put things in place to help those things happen, even for disabled people, you're not doing your job.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that one of the biggest challenges with gaining traction within the government is that, our government is supposed to be by and for the people. But disabled people are seriously underrepresented within the government leadership and in elected office. It is extremely rare to encounter a disabled person in any government role, much less one such as the chief executive. We do now have a senator from Illinois, Tammy Duckworth, who is a wheelchair user. There are a couple of other amputees in Congress. The governor of the state of Texas is a wheelchair user. Certainly would like to see more initiative on behalf of the disability community from leaders, who do have disabilities and find themselves in office. But of course, the challenge is building consensus when, you are one person or a handful of people among a body of hundreds of decision makers. If the disability community had their 25% representation in Congress, I think that there would be a lot more support for the community and the things that are needed to make our society and our communities accessible. But it's sort of one of those things where, I feel like, sort of what comes first. The legislators with disabilities who can push these things across the finish line, or the actual engagement of people in society that can generate the opportunities for disabled people to gain political influence and power. And so, it's sort of, if you lock someone away in a cupboard or in a home, they're not going to have the same opportunity to engage in their community and to gain, the opportunity to seek elected office successfully. There are a lot of disabled people who run for political office, but they're often, the fringe candidate who did things independently, and they don't have that wide base of support. And the reason that they lack that is because for the vast majority of their life, or perhaps their entire lives, they have been denied the same access to the opportunity to build relationships, secure the career, to engage in their community in a way that would allow them to set themselves up for success in politics. And, I don't see that changing anytime soon. And that is depressing. Before my car accident, I really did think that I was going to find my way into politics one day. I was really passionate about politics. Now, I think in this toxic political environment, I don't really have any interest at all. But if I did, I feel that it would be much harder for me now to attain political office, not because I am, any less accomplished than I might have been at this stage in my life had I not had the disability, or for any other reason than I just don't have access to the same rooms. And it's not too long ago, I forget what state this was out of, but a man was running, he was held political office, I think was running again for re-election to the county commission or to the mayor, the mayor's office. And he had to climb from his wheelchair onto the debate stage. There was not any interest among people present who watched this unfold and saying, well, maybe we can move the podium, everyone's podium or the table that you'll sit at, down from the stage. It's no, we're going to force this disabled man to face some indignity. And I think that that is incredibly troubling. And at the end of the day, disabled people need to be equitably represented in every aspect of society. That means, 25% of the people at the baseball park watching the game should be disabled. If we're a truly equitable world, 25% of people in elected office should be disabled. And, I'm not saying set a quota. There's no mandate that, every place in society should be equal and everyone should be equally represented, because that denies the opportunity for people to distinguish themselves through hard work and effort that, is really the lifeblood of the so-called American dream. But people need to have an opportunity to compete. And I think that a lot of people have not even made it to the starting line through no fault of their own. And that infuriates me, but it also encourages me and inspires me to continue chipping away at the platforms, policies, and programs that keep disabled people from reaching their full potential.
Yeah, that's incredibly important, but it's hard to not get disheartened, because it's like that feedback system we were talking about before. If we're doing all this to give people their feedback and the people at the top aren't listening or don't care, there isn't much that's going to happen.
Yeah. It seems like more of a formality. We need to look like we care and act like we want to be inclusive and listen to our customers, but not really. It's just a formality, it's
To let people know that we're listening.
Yeah.
And I think, as Crystal, you pointed out earlier, there are businesses and governments out there that are really doing incredible work in the area of including disabled people in the DEI discussion. And I think, one of the ways that I see this, I get a lot of emails from different newsletters that I've subscribed to or businesses that I've engaged with before. And I recently received an email from Coursera. They're sort of an online e-learning platform with, courses that, people have created on a lot of different topics. And they were pitching to me a class that had to do in some way with DE&I. And one of the images that they used was of a man in a wheelchair. And it was actually a true man in a real wheelchair, not a real disabled guy in a real wheelchair that was his own to use. And that is it's a small thing, of course. But that image made me think, well, hey, maybe someone in there gets this. They didn't go onto some stock photo website and pull out a picture of a disabled guy that I've seen, in 100 different places, or particularly in the travel industry, the woman standing up out of her hospital wheelchair, in front of some grand environment like Angkor Wat in Cambodia or something. That is, to me, when I see those images used over and over again by companies, like, how difficult would it have been to, reach out to a disabled model, to, ask them to shoot a photo of themselves, to use in your ad campaign if you don't want to make a big investment, or if you do want to make a larger investment, invite them out with your camera crew and get the photo that you need. Companies do this in a lot of spaces with a lot of different groups, people who represent different identities. And it's something that, I think that we need to see more of. I think one of the things that frustrates me to no end is, you get on the airplane and they play the video of the safety briefing. And these videos actually include, employees of the company. Like, they spend, hundreds of thousands of dollars to produce these safety videos. And they bring in employees from all across their company, in to create the safety video. And I've seen a lot of diversity represented in them. But what I've never seen is a disabled person. And I've never seen a wheelchair user. And I think, one of the questions that I asked a few years ago was, well, gosh, what happens to a disabled person? What happens to me in the event of an emergency evacuation of this airplane? And the airlines didn't have any good answers to that question. It's not something that they thought about. And then I thought, well, maybe that makes sense that someone like me wouldn't be in the safety video if there is no plan for me. But it would be nice to see representation. And I think that the lack of representation of disabled people, it stings a little harder when you can see that otherwise the company has made a big effort to be diverse and inclusive, just not for our community. And that, I think, that sort of is that surface level inclusion. I think it should cause those other groups to worry a lot. That maybe the inclusion that their company is promising them is really only surface level.
Right.
It doesn't go into the deep,
Right.
the center and core of the organization. And the easy thing is including people in a photo or a video. But that is the first step. And where you don't see that, you can pretty much be assured there's nothing deeper going on there.
Right.
So anyway, I think that
Oh, goodness.
it's frustrating and there are a lot of
Yeah.
problems, but I really do think that the solution to all of this is having conversations like this, like we've had today, and others that we've talked about, with the people who actually have some decision-making authority, wherever they be, whether they're in, public, private industry, nonprofit organizations, the restaurant down the street. We need equal access everywhere. And that is a slogan that I've adopted for my work in terms of, what is my goal? And it really is that equal access everywhere. That's what I want to see. I'm not going to achieve it in my lifetime, not everywhere, but hopefully in my lifetime, I can achieve that. I can be a part of the work to bring equal access to a lot of places. And I think that that's how each of us have to look at it. What good can we do in our lifetimes? We're not going to solve every problem that humanity faces. We're not going to solve every problem that our community, has to endure.
We have to start somewhere.
Exactly. And we can do a lot of things. It's one step at a time, unfortunately. People are not going to see it as urgent of an issue as we ourselves see it. But if we can start making steps in the right direction, it's going to be better for us and for the people who are going to come after us. And that really is the gift that we all have to give. If we think of how many things we would not have today if the people before us had said, well, I can't get everything I want, so it's not worth the fight. I don't think that we'd even have the light bulb. If people, so many, years in the past had not innovated, we might not even have the wheel, to be honest. So each of us builds off the work of another. Nothing is ever truly independent. And, we can work not only for our own betterment, but for the betterment of a future for others. And, sometimes it's hard to get excited about that. I'm building a great future that might not impact me, but it will impact others. And, depending on what you believe, some people believe that, we're reincarnated. I'm not one of those people, but if you are, build a better world for your future self, right?
Right. And, I keep going back to the whole toxicity thing, with what we've been taught and people we interact with and things like that. Think about all the things we would have already achieved. And if we were able to communicate with people without the gaslighting and manipulation and stuff like that, it's an arguable thing, that there are much bigger problems in the world. Okay, I get that. But, if we kind of do it to ourselves again, where when we have that toxicity and stuff, then we're not able to work together because we don't want to work with somebody who's toxic, and that's all those things we kind of push away from it, but how are we going to advance as a society if we can't achieve that?
I read something recently. It was sort of a critique of a critique of a critique, maybe. But it was talking. We hear a lot of things about the environment right now, and sort of the perilous course that we're on with climate change. And there's a lot of disagreement on that. Many people believe it entirely. Many people don't believe it at all. I'm not going to take a side, since that's not my debate, really. But there is sort of a question. One of the things that people who are not believers in climate change bring up a lot is they say, well, 10 years ago they said we only had 10 years, and 20 years ago they said we only had 20 years or 30 years or whatever it may be. And sure, data is changing, scientific opinion is adjusting to the new research that is being conducted. That's fair. But this article looked at sort of a debate that happened a long time ago. Well, not actually all that long ago. It's still going on at the start of my lifetime. And this was around the hole in the ozone layer and what was causing that. And you probably remember from grade school, I remember some lessons on this about the chlorofluorocarbons, the CFCs, in some of our air conditioning systems, that were really one of the big culprits in terms of the hole that was growing in our ozone layer. And the reason that is not in discussion anymore is not because it was entirely solved. I mean, there's still impacts occurring with our ozone layer, but the most alarming challenge with that, the gaping hole that was opening and was going to deplete the layer of protection that we have from the sun, has started to heal and close up. And the reason that's happened is because there was decisive action taken to phase out CFCs in our air conditioning systems, in the cars that we drive, and tremendous action was taken because we recognized that we had reached a certain tipping point. And I think about that with disability advocacy in terms of what will the tipping point be? Sort of when will we have this recognition that there is a big problem in front of us? And I think that actually we're getting there. And I think that one of the areas that we're seeing this happen is birth rates are declining in the United States and in many other countries around the world, but it's most pronounced perhaps in Japan. Okay. And in Japan, they're having a crisis because birth rates are so low, definitely below, the factor required to replace the aging population as they die, but people are living longer and longer lives. And so more people are reaching retirement age and sometimes have 20, 30, 40 years even of retirement ahead of them that younger people who are working have to care for. And so I think that one of the reasons that we're going to see sort of a surge in accessibility in the future is to include disabled people in the workforce, to include older people who have challenges to maintain their ability to remain in the workforce. Because, it's no question that the retirement age in America is going to be extended out further. We're seeing a lot of protests right now in France. The president there has announced a plan to increase the retirement age in that country. Sort of the trade-off for living longer is that we're going to have to work longer. And we're not going to be able to afford people not contributing to the economy. And so there is going to be, I think, a renewed interest in doing this the right way and saying, well, you have a disability, no question about that. But how can we engage you in, the common work that we do? How can we create an environment in which you can exceed, in which you can succeed and excel in the workforce? And I think that that is going to be the tipping point in terms of leading us to a world that is more universally designed. And I think that tipping point is coming a heck of a lot sooner than we think.
Definitely, yeah.
Definitely.
You've talked about it a lot, how, it would be so smart. And I don't even know why this is an argument or a debate. It would be so wise of people to make the world inclusive and accessible. Because think about our children, think about us, think about our parents that are coming of age, are getting old, and the elders, if humanity is not able to thrive regardless of their abilities or disabilities, this is going to be a very, very sad situation going forward. And, their businesses are not going to go anywhere because people are not going to be able to get to them to do anything.
Yeah, I think, I think right now, probably what we're living in is a period of time where things are going to get a little worse before they get better. We see
Definitely,
that.
Yeah.
We see that with cutbacks to, benefits and discussions of
not just that, but pushback of people that are going to argue and, try to deny what's been going on and stuff like that. I know that clearly. And it's hard to get other people on board with that, understanding the whole philosophy and psychology behind it. But come on, people, open their eyes.
Yeah, and I definitely am looking forward to the day when I will be able to say I told you so. And I think that
I don't want to say that, but
Well, I know. I think I'm not advocating for, rubbing it in people's faces, but um, I do think that there is an largely unrecognized opportunity that exists, um, for business and government. When we build an inclusive world, one where everyone can participate, then everyone will participate. I don't think that there are people, not in any significant number, who do not want to have the ability to participate in society and in their communities. And so when we create an opportunity for that to happen, people will take advantage of it. People take advantage of opportunities that present themselves. It is in our nature to strive for more, to want more, not only from the world, but of ourselves. Human beings drive themselves to more and to reach greater heights. That's why that we are such an innovative species.
Right.
And I'm excited to see what is to come of all of this. But I'm not going to deny the fact that it is going to take a lot of work from a lot of people to achieve the ends that we'd like to see. And I'm buckled in, I'm strapped up and ready to go.
Yes. Yes.
And to be part of that journey. But I also know that it's not something I can do on my own.
No. It's gonna take a collective, not just the disability. I feel like the disability community is totally, hold on, let's go, and trying really hard to, help each other in the disability community, but also the able-bodied community understand, the whole, everything going on and all the issues. And so yeah, it's going to be really interesting and hopefully in a good way.
I hope so. I'm confident that it will be a good result at the end. We have seen sort of the opportunity for freedom and greater opportunity delivered to so many people over the course of centuries of time. And I'm confident that, disabled people are going to get it. They're going to get it in some countries faster than others. Yeah. And we're already seeing that. I think sometimes that we forget here in the United States that we are among the most privileged disabled people on planet Earth. Certainly not the most privileged, but very close to it. And, that is something to be grateful for. But in my view, as the saying goes, a rising tide lifts all boats. And so we need to continue working to build the foundations that people around the world can use as their example, and always be striving for more.
All right. Do you have any more?
Yeah, just one more question. So I'm assuming your website and blog talks about this, but where can someone who's disabled who wants to travel, where can they start? Or how should they get started?
Great question. When I, obviously having been a traveler before my disability, I knew how the travel process worked. But what I didn't know was everything to do with traveling with a disability. How do I get assistance? Will my wheelchair actually fit on the plane? Is that even possible? And so I had to do a lot of research when I started out to take that first trip. I didn't even know that a wheelchair taxi was a thing. That's something that I discovered in the course of my research. I wasn't sure that public transit was accessible. Probably because I had climbed a lot of stairs and gone up a lot of escalators and subway systems around the country. And the reality is, yeah, some of them are not accessible. There is not full and complete accessibility. There are a lot of things that you can't count on. So, my idea in creating my website, which is at wheelchairtravel.org, is answering those questions for the first time traveler. So there's a very detailed, frequently asked questions and information section on the website that goes through, sort of what to expect in traveling by air, in visiting hotels, and traveling abroad for the first time. And I try to answer those core questions early, and then invite travelers and readers to go a little deeper with me into looking at individual destinations, sort of looking at the accessibility infrastructure. One city can be very different than another. I'd much rather visit Philadelphia than New York City. Philly, in my view, is a lot more accessible. And it's not that far away, like a 45-minute train ride between the two. And so there's a lot of variation. The United States of America is not a monolith. There is differentiation in culture and accessibility all over this country. And it's important to know, before you make the trip. And so tons of resources on the website, a lot of advocacy too. I'm, fighting for a more accessible world of travel, and I would love for others to join me in that campaign as well.
I have one more question. So I know traveling if you talk about the airports, is a sore subject. They're horrible at accessibility when it comes to that. Can you talk a little bit about that before we go?
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest fears that wheelchair users have when they're traveling by air is, am I going to get my wheelchair back in one piece? Or for people who use other types of mobility equipment, is that going to come back in one piece? And for moms with strollers, they're worried about that too. I mean, the reality is that airlines do not treat wheelchairs with the care that they are due. While they're not going to, toss a 400-pound power wheelchair the way that they would a suitcase or a duffel bag, there are still dangers inherent. There are a lot of reasons that wheelchairs get damaged. It's probably not why, you think they are. I mean, they are not tossing your wheelchair usually. Occasionally, a lighter manual chair might get, thrown around a little bit. But, the reality is that the reason wheelchairs get damaged is that they are, we as disabled people think of our mobility devices as an extension of our bodies. Key to our mobility, an important tool that we rely upon. And the place that we, you think about this, where do you take the things when you're flying that are most important to you? Where do you take your kid? Where do you take your laptop? Where do you take your medication? You take that inside the airplane, inside the cabin, under your seat, on your lap, wherever. But inside the cabin, you don't put that stuff in the cargo hold. And the reality is that the cargo hold is where a lot of things that are not important get tossed and bounced around and thrown on top of each other. And a wheelchair does not belong there. But right now, that's where they have to go. and so they get damaged because they're in an environment that they're not meant for. And the plane bounces around, and the wheelchair, gets jostled and tipped over, and you know, mishandled. It's not where it's supposed to be. And so yeah, wheelchairs get damaged. There are government statistics on that, which I think underrepresent the scope of the problem and the true number of chairs that are damaged. But in terms of very serious damage, it is rare. Less than 1% of the time, in my view. And from my large sample size and data that I've collected from my own experience, it's a less than 1% chance that your wheelchair, you're not going to be able to use it when you get off the flight. And so I think that, I think that people should travel. If the airline damages your wheelchair, they're liable. They're going to have to pay for it. They're going to have to repair or replace it. And I know that that's a frustrating process. It's harmful to some people. But, I think that sort of with, in any case where there is risk, we have to calculate the possibility of it happening, what the problems are for us if they do. And in my calculation, and these are always personal, but in my calculation of risk, I think that the benefits inherent in traveling far outweigh, the problems that could arise should my wheelchair be damaged. And that may not be true for everyone. But that's why we have to make that personal assessment. And I love to travel. It opens my life to opportunity and joy. I find so much joy in traveling and meeting new people and gaining new experiences that I'd be willing to do just about everything else. I would say I would give everything to continue traveling, but I've lost a lot already in my car accident, and I need this hand, so don't take this one from me. But I would give up a lot to travel, and maybe I have already, but I just think that there are tremendous things that await us all out there. And again, all travel doesn't involve an airplane, and it doesn't have to. So I want to keep people open to the understanding that when we travel, it doesn't have to be to a faraway place. We can do all sorts of things. We can ride the train. We can ride the Greyhound bus. We can ride the city bus across town. To open ourselves up to a new experience. And that really is what it's about for me. I don't want to be cooped up in my apartment here in Boston. It's an incredible city. And, I said yesterday that I went to the Boston Marathon. It was raining. I didn't want to go outside yesterday, but I wanted to be out in the community and I wanted to travel, even though it was less than a mile away, the finish line. I wanted to be there. I wanted to have that experience. And, even though it wasn't everything that I dreamed of and imagined, it gave me a story. And I loved the experience, even though it wasn't as accessible as I would have liked. And it was raining, and all of that aside, it got me out of the house. And that's what I live for. And I hope that maybe that can inspire you to get out and live your life to the fullest extent possible. And if there are challenges and barriers that block that opportunity, to join me in the fight, and join many others in the fight, to make the world more accessible to all of us.
There are so many opportunities that could be had if it was only more accessible. And like I said, it all starts at the top, and it's obvious how people at the top treat disabled people, and it shows people like in the FDA that we're disregarded, and how to treat us and the extension of what we need to get around, so, it's a trickle down process, that we need to help people understand.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna. Well, I didn't want to interrupt you if you wanted to add to Crystal's point.
No, I think that obviously we all recognize that it's not just the work that needs to be done to get us to where we want to go, but also the allies that we have to win in the process. And that's something that I think that there are a lot of different perspectives on how to win allies, but either way, I think it starts at the very least with a respectful hello, and then you can take it from there in the
Absolutely.
direction that you think is best. And if there's a lot of trial and error, there are a lot of people that I've spoken to and they did not want to return my hello, and that's fine. I learned from that, and then I get to work seeking out another ally. And I think that really is the thing. It's sometimes I feel like when I'm trying to get some support on something, I feel like I was when I was a little middle schooler nerd trying to get a date with a girl. They mostly said no to me, and that's fine. I had to keep working at it, and there is. I think there is something better on the other side. When we achieve the success that we're looking for, might have been a lot of hard work, a lot of rejection, a lot of anger and frustration. And I know sometimes our blood is boiling and we're so angry, but have to cast that aside and get refocused in building the relationships that are necessary to get us where we want to be. And you may find some surprising allies at the end of this, and some people that you thought would be allies that turn out not to be. All of that is going to feature in this journey. But the main thing is not ever losing hope and not ever losing sight of the goal.
Lastly, John, how do people reach out to you? What's the best way they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so again, you can find me online. Wheelchairtravel.org is my website. I'm also on social media, Facebook and Instagram at Wheelchair Travel. That's the username. And on Twitter, due to character limits, I am WC Travel Org. Wheelchair Travel is one character too long, and Elon Musk hasn't responded to any of my tweets asking for that extra character. So I live in hope there as well. I'm going to get that extra character one day on Twitter, but you can find me in all of those places. I love to connect. Hope you'll check out the website, subscribe to my newsletter, which I send twice a month, to share about all the different things that I'm working on and engaged with, and also some content that hopefully will help you dream a little bit about places to go and things to see.
Thank you so much for joining us today, John.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark and Crystal. It was a pleasure to be with you, and I hope you'll take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.